Authorities are warning those in flood zones because the Wisconsin River is expected to hit major flood levels. As of this morning, the river is at 18.9 feet, which is already in flood stage. Currently, the river is expected to rise to 20.3 feet, which would put it in major flood stage. If that happens, officials will monitor the river around the clock and advise whether people should evacuate. As of right now, we have not been notified of evacuations, but we will certainly let you know.